I mean, you say we can't even call China a threat. There are still people who just refuse to accept that this is another Cold War. We can't even call it a Cold War, let alone a threat.
Well, I mean, I feel like a Cold War sounds worse than a threat.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in a Cold War, this is like now you're in a great power competition. That's much more serious than just saying, well, they might be a threat to us.
I guess.
Yeah. But I feel like, to your point, Jim, like the Chinese Communist Party has been saying and acting like they're bullying countries. They're really being more and more aggressive. But then it's almost like we are the ones that are trying to make excuses for that. Like they are showing us what they're doing and they're being more and more aggressive. But then you have what you call the engager school of people who are kind of all just like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Or they're just being a bully. Like they're just, it's just like words or whatever. Like this whole wolf warrior diplomacy idea is like they're just coming out and being more aggressive diplomatically.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. And the China hands that I talk to, and I try to talk to as many as I can. I mean, they'll say that, this is Xi. This is Xi. If we didn't have Xi, the party would probably go back to the way it was under Hu Jintao. We'd have more liberalization and opening up. And it's only because of Xi. And if you challenge that and say, well, no, actually, you can go back and look at all their leaders and look at the party. This is the pathway. This is the ideology. This is the trajectory that the party's on. Then they'll say, well, you're a determinist. And so you're a determinist. You've decided that they're going to be an enemy, and there's nothing that will change your mind on that. And I'd say, hey, I'll change my mind when you show me that they're not threatening me. When they're not talking about launching nuclear missiles at my allies in Australia or Japan, or the things that they say in Global Times all the time, or the military that they're building, or those ICBM silos. So I think we're past the point of saying this is just normal buildup for a big country. What we're seeing on display in the Olympics, this is about China taking the world stage as the sole global superpower, and that's not going to be fun for everybody.
Well, this is one of the strengths of the China's military that doesn't really get talked about so much, but the idea of like their political subversion, how they've been able to bend, American politicians or analysts or think tank people to have this sort of, engagement viewpoint towards dealing with China, which really gives the Chinese regime lots of cover to be able to develop its military.
That's exactly what's happened over the last 30 years. They've been able to operate under this kind of cover of, well, they're developing, we need to engage with them so they can become like us. And they were able to race ahead and do the things that, take an obsolete military that they basically had in the late 90s and transform it into a military force that's capable of fight across all spectrums right now. Maybe they're not able to launch an invasion of Afghanistan from, like we did, from America into Afghanistan or something. But they don't need to be there right now. What they need to do right now is what they've been doing in terms of, I need to be able to take Taiwan. I need to be able to take the Senkakus in the South China Sea, which I think they have essentially. And I need to be able to take out some territory with India and then expand my network and influence through things like the Belt and Road, One Belt, One Road, and what we're seeing and things like how were they able to get the Beijing Olympics? I mean, there's no snow there. It's not an alpine region, but yet the International Olympic Committee was happy to award them those Beijing Olympics. Was it because Beijing and the Communist Party wanted to have the spectacle of being the only country in history of the Olympics that had both winter and summer games? Maybe. What's going on in the influence that China has in the United Nations? What does it have in the World Bank and these areas where they're able to, influence things for their way? And, some people say, well, you're just sour grapes because you're an American and you don't want to lose your power. And I'd say, yeah, that's right. I am. I'm an American and I feel pretty good about what we've done as a nation in terms of world history and the things that we've done and the principles that we stand for. China doesn't stand for the same principles that we do. And so I guess that would get to one of the last points that we discussed online before which is, we talked about this comparison between the militaries, motivation. When I look and see and hear everything that comes out of China, they seem to be motivated up and down the spectrum. When I see, their videos, sure, their videos are propaganda, but when we look at their forces and we look at what people are saying, it seems like the PLA and its members are highly motivated, and the party, 95 million of them, are motivated to achieve their strategic goals. They've got a focus, they've got a purpose, and they're motivated. And when I look at our own country, I'm sometimes wondering, we don't have a purpose. As we just debated the last hour, are we a maritime nation? Are we a land power? Do we even understand the implications of being a maritime power on our daily lives, our national security? And then are we focused on that, or are we focused on other things that this new administration has brought out in the first year for the Department of Defense, looking for domestic terrorists or promoting, non-warfighting issues?
I mean, it almost seems linked in a certain way that, like, Jim, to have a purpose for a military, there almost has to be some kind of threat that you're watching out for, right?
Or not even just a threat, but a national identity.
Well, I was just thinking part of the whole thing about China using nationalism a lot right now. But if we don't admit that the Chinese Communist Party is a threat, then we don't need to confront it. Then there's not really a purpose to why do we need to be a maritime power if there's not going to be another nation that's going to control the seas? Like, if it is, the kind of 90s end of history type of thing where everybody's going to be a liberal, democratic nation, that's what's going to happen, then, maybe you don't need superpowers anymore. But you have to only want to look at the world through a particular lens and not through what's happening right now.
I think that's my biggest concern, Shelley, is that we're being defeated from the inside in terms of ideology. Huntington talked about the class of civilizations, and that was a motivator for what we did, rightly or wrongly, maybe you could say, in the desert over the last 30 years in some ways. We had the Soviets, but it was still a clash of ideologies, maybe not civilizations, but ideologies, and the differences were stark. But today in the United States, we have polls that say that, large numbers of our society think that socialism maybe isn't that bad, and maybe communism should be thought about. And so what used to be our civilization is eroding into something that, is more akin to what the Chinese Communist Party wants to do and subvert us. And so they're defeating us that way, and they're demotivating us. So when I talk about motivation, I'm not here to say that the U.S. Navy sailors and Marines that are serving, and Army and Air Force that are serving today are not motivated. But when I go up and ask them, and I did that when I was on active duty more than 7 years ago, I would ask my sailors, what did you do today to defeat the Chinese? Not in a physical sense, but what did you do to defend America? What did you do? And a lot of times people would be like, well, I don't know. I'm just here. It's almost like being in the military today is like working at Xerox, which is nothing wrong with working at Xerox. I could pick another company, but the point is, working at Xerox isn't the same as working in a place where you're going to give your life from your fellow citizen, where you put on a uniform and you say, I'm going to put aside my personal interest for the team, the U.S. military team. I'm going to wear my uniform and I'm going to serve proudly, and I'm not going to be thin-skinned about certain things that are being discussed in social circles in the media. And I'm here to fight and win against whoever they tell me to go fight and win against. And it helps if you know who you're fighting and going against. When I said, when I came in, it was clear it was the Soviet Union, and there was no debate about it. There was no partisanship to it. There wasn't Democrats versus Republicans. If you were in the U.S. military, you knew what the enemy was, and it didn't matter if you were in the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. You knew, and it didn't matter if you were a civilian working in the Pentagon. Everything was about defending America against the Soviets, and that meant fighting the Soviets in the worst case. And we don't have that, as you say, we don't have that today. And it's even being further eroded by all this other non-war fighting discussions that we'll have in our society. I don't want to go into the whole list because it's just too provocative, but you know what I'm talking about. Everybody knows what we're talking about. We're doing everything except talking about how am I going to kill the Chinese? And I don't want to kill one Chinese person, but if that's my job, then I have to talk about it. I have to think about it. I have to chew on it. I have to spend every waking hour thinking about and building up the capacity to defeat and kill the Chinese military. That's the job. And if we don't have that in our military today, we're not going to be successful. And people have to talk like that. And and they'll call you a warmonger, they'll call you crazy, they'll call you all those things. But we did that for over 40 years with the Soviets, and we never had a war because the Soviet Union understood and respected power. As Ronald Reagan said, peace through strength. So nobody wants to go to war, but we're all prepared to go to do it. At least we were. And I hope that we still will be for as long as we're a nation.